If Notre Dame shows up ready to play against Syracuse on Saturday, they should blow them out. But that's not the question that everyone's been asking about. The real question is whether the Irish can use these next two games to fix the crucial flaws that could keep them from making a deep playoff run. We're covering that, plus a whole lot more on today's mailbag.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up? Welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily home for Notre Dame football. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is now the #1 sports podcast network in America, all thanks to viewers and listeners like yourself, so we really do appreciate your support. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum, producer at Fox Sports, and I've been covering the Irish since 2020. It is Friday, November 21st, so happy Friday, everybody, and thanks for starting your game weekend right here by making this your first watch or listen of the day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. And remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel or follow along wherever you are listening to the podcast. And today, we have got a great show on tap for you. Notre Dame hosts Syracuse tomorrow in the final guaranteed home game of the 2025 season. And while the Irish should take care of business on the field, these next 2 weeks are all about sharpening up for the postseason. And in today's mailbag, we're going to dig into the biggest issues Notre Dame needs to clean up before the college football playoff. We're also going to talk about the players who could emerge with more reps and some big picture questions about CJ Carr, the senior class, and the future of the roster. And of course, we're going to wrap it up with some fun senior day hypotheticals and a Notre Dame time machine scenario that I've never really thought about until today. So a lot of fun coming your way here, but we're going to actually start with a quick show announcement before we jump into the first question. So as the everyday viewers and listeners of this show know, every Tuesday during the season, my guy Luke Smith comes on the show and we kick off every episode with his now famous Boots on the Ground report from wherever Notre Dame played that weekend. Luke goes to pretty much every single Notre Dame game, home or away. This year, he's been to 8 out of the 10 games this season, which is actually kind of a low mark for him. Not to call him out, but, I'm just saying he did miss 2. And he once said that if Notre Dame played in Afghanistan, he'd be there. But either way, he is usually our guy on the scene. But going forward, we're going to try something new. If you're heading to the Syracuse game this weekend or any Notre Dame in the future, home or away, we want your Boots on the Ground report. Send us your best stories, observations, or anything fun that happened on game day, and we will read our favorite one on the Tuesday show. Luke is still going to be there, so we're always going to get his report, but we want to hear from you as well. You can submit yours the same way you send mailbag questions. You can drop them in the YouTube comments, DM me on Twitter at Locked On Irish, send it in on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod, or you can hit up Luke directly on Twitter at ThatSmith15. So at ThatSmith15. If you're making the trip to South Bend this weekend and you've got some great moments to share, send them our way. You might just hear yours featured next Tuesday. All right, now let's get into the questions here. And I got 3 that were basically asking the same thing. So we're going to group them all together here. At ScabbedMinx8080, at JC+5, and at CPD2687 all asked some version of the following question. Given the failures in short-yardage situations all year long and the repeated efforts to clean this up, what are the chances that Mike Denbrock actually figures things out this season? It's a question that we have discussed at length on the show in different ways, but Marcus Freeman actually spoke about Notre Dame's short-yardage issues and their goal-to-go issues in his Zoom conference on Thursday, so it's actually the perfect time to bring this up again. And Freeman admitted that it was not a great play call on 4th and 1 against Pittsburgh last week. And even though we all knew that, we saw that with our very own eyes, it was actually pretty refreshing to hear Marcus Freeman own that and say that they should have just given the ball to Jeremiah Love because he's the best player in the entire country. And even if he doesn't get it, you can at least live with the decision to give it to your best player. And if he gets stuffed, he gets stuffed. So I think we all agree there. But Marcus Freeman was also asked about putting CJ Carr under center, and he said that they practiced shotgun 90% of the time, and he referenced how they didn't have all that much success when they did run CJ Carr under center and they had to do the QB sneak when they were backed up on their own end zone. So he said it's like a risk-reward situation. While I get that, there is some risk to putting your quarterback under center if that is not what he normally does, but I still think that 10% of practice time should be more than enough to put your quarterback under center and handle the snap. Because when CJ Carr goes to the NFL, which he will, guess what he's going to have to do? Take the snap from under the center. So you might as well break him in now, at least a little bit. And I don't even think running a QB sneak with CJ Carr is the best idea there, because he's just not the biggest guy. He's not able to get the power and leverage that you need there for a quarterback to get that sneak. But even if you hand the ball to Love, it's just more efficient there. It's more effective there. And there have been studies done to prove that, where if the quarterback lines up under center and he hands the ball off, Jeremiah Love has all this momentum going forward, and that might be the difference between converting and not converting. So to me, I still think they can fix it. I think they can get creative. We got some suggestions about putting two running backs out there. I'd be all for that, as I've said many times, but clearly Mike Denbrock just doesn't love it. They tried to do that in the season opener against Miami. They didn't really force the issue, but they didn't have a lot of success, so Mike Denbrock threw it out. After that, I've even said, too, I didn't hate the Wildcat. I think that they could do the Wildcat just with Love and Price in the backfield and then run Faison and emotion. But to me, the biggest issue is scheme and also the offensive line. And I'll actually throw in the tight ends as well, because this offensive unit is not built to win in a crowded box when they have 12 personnel. This isn't like the 2020 team when they were running 13 personnel and they dared you to bring more dudes in the box and they'd still run all over you. Like, Eli Raridan is a good pass catcher. He's gotten better as a blocker, but that's not really his game. Ty Washington has been pretty disappointing as a blocker. Cooper Flanagan is not even out there on the field. James Flanagan, the true freshman, made some nice plays against Pitt as a blocker, so maybe he becomes more part of the offense here going forward. But they just aren't able to block that many guys when they're in the crowded box, and I think a big reason why is because they are so thin at tight end. So I would encourage Notre Dame, when they're in these short yardage situations, to just spread it out. I don't care if you put the wide receivers as far as you possibly can near the sidelines. Spread them out, go 4 wide, and then let CJ Carr and the defense dictate what you want to do. Because if they go with a light box, then you just run the ball. But if they decide they want to stack the box, despite the fact that you have 4 receivers or 3 receivers and a tight end split out wide, well, then CJ Carr just gets to pick the matchup that he favors the most, and he can just throw it there. So that would be my solution. I'm sure Mike Denbrock has spent many hours trying to figure out what they're going to do going forward. So I am optimistic that they are going to get this fixed eventually. Hopefully this weekend against Syracuse, they start to make some progress. Then Stanford, they clean it up even more, and then they go into the playoff clicking on all cylinders. All right, our next one comes from @G. Which senior do you want to see have a big moment on Saturday? There's a few that come to mind. I'd like to see defensive tackle Jason Onye get a sack or something like that. Just given everything that he has been through at Notre Dame, he has had quite the redemption arc, and he's been a big-time player for the Irish this season. So if he goes out there and makes a big play, I think that'd be really satisfying for him, and I think everyone in the crowd just can be really proud of him because, look, he went through a lot last year, and then for him to get through that and work his way back onto the roster and become a leader of this team, I think tells you a lot about his character, his personality, and the way his teammates respond to him. So I'd like to see him have a big moment, especially considering the fact that he did have a big moment taken away from him inside Notre Dame Stadium earlier this year when he just drilled the quarterback and then Jalen Snead picked the ball off. Like, that should have been a great play for both of those guys, and then it was negated because of a roughing the passer penalty that still to this day makes no sense. But while we're on that note, I'd love to see Jalen Snead go out there and get another interception since that one was taken away from him. And he's another guy who, he could have left. He could have left after last season. He could have left after the season prior to that. He's a 5-star recruit coming out of high school, and it didn't really work out in the way that many of us had hoped for a 5-star linebacker coming to Notre Dame. But he still had a great career. He still was a part of some big-time moments, like that pass that was intercepted by Christian Gray from Drew Aller. Like, Jalen Snead set that up, and that's going to go down as one of the greatest plays in Notre Dame history because they won a playoff game in the semifinal and sent them to the national championship. Like, Mitch Jeter doesn't make that game-winning field goal unless Jalen Snead gets pressure on Aller and it sets up the interception. So I'd love to have him have a moment. And another guy from that same recruiting class, Junior Tuihalamaka, very underrated player. He and Jalen Snead were one of those big-time defensive recruits that committed to Marcus Freeman back when he was a defensive coordinator. And then once Marcus Freeman became a head coach, Marcus Freeman's first year as that coach was also the freshman year for Tuihalamaka and Snead and all those guys in that class. And Tuialamaka could have left. He had a position change, but he decided to stick around, and he was rewarded last year when he got a lot more playing time because of injuries in front of him, and then he's going out there in the college football playoff recovering a fumble that set up a huge touchdown at the end of the first half. Like, I really would like to see all the guys who could have left have a big moment inside Notre Dame Stadium on their senior day. You could throw Jadarian Price in the mix as well. He's had a rough couple games as of late, but I think he's going to go out there and have a big game on Saturday against Syracuse. It looked like when he was a freshman, he might be getting playing time right away. Then he ruptured his Achilles, so then his career was kind of put on hold for a little bit. Ended up developing into this stud running back that has done so many great things for Notre Dame. And he could have left after last season, gotten a lot of money to play somewhere else, but he decided to come back to Notre Dame. He's going to have a senior day, gets to walk out there with his family, and I hope he gets his moment to shine as well. All right, Jose Lopez. Who are some of the second and third string players you would love to see get more reps and get hot during these last two games? Among those depth pieces, who do you think could break out the most during a potential college football playoff run next month? There's a few guys that come to mind. I've said this before on the show. I would love to see Aeneas Williams get more touches. I've pretty much given up on Jawan Sider rotating him in during a competitive point in the game. Like, they didn't even bring him in at the end of the game last week against Pitt when that was well in hand. So I don't think he's going to have like a run in the playoff unless Jadarian Price or Jeremiah Love get hurt, God forbid. But he's a really, really good player, and I hope he sticks around next year. So maybe if he gets some action, he'll realize that being in a Notre Dame uniform is what he wants to do, and that's where he wants to be next year and beyond that. So hopefully Aeneas Williams gets some touches, and if he does get the ball, he's probably going to score because that's just what he does. And then Micah Gilbert, he had the first touchdown of the season, and then we have not heard much from him since because he's been dealing with that hand injury that's been sort of lingering throughout the season, but he was out there more against Pitt. He could be a nice little bonus to the wide receiver room, and then on defense, I would say Man Framo, the true freshman, has been playing a lot more. I think he's going to be a big part of the team next year, so the more reps he gets at the end of this season, those are going to be very valuable as we look ahead to 2026. And also, Luke Talich, he's been playing really well as of late. Obviously, Adon Schuler and Tay Johnson aren't going to come off the field very often, but Luke Talich has 3 interceptions and 3 pass breakups, as well as 21 tackles this year, and he's not even a starter. So I could see him making some big plays in the postseason. I don't really see any of these guys making like a big run where they get hot and they sort of change the trajectory of this team, but each one of these guys could come up with a moment if Notre Dame ends up making the playoff. And I think Luke Talich has already had several big moments this year, and he could add on to that list if the Irish make the postseason. All right, that covers what Notre Dame needs to clean up during these tune-up games. And now let's get into some bigger picture questions about quarterback production, rising stars, and who's trending up as we look ahead to the future. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. College football is in full swing, and I could not be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there is just nothing like it. But let's be real, actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It is the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I pulled up Game Time, and in just a couple taps, I saw amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite college football games for as low as $25. The app made it super simple. I could even see the exact view from my seat before buying, and I love the zone deals too. Pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you save big. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Welcome back to the Friday Mailbag here on Locked On Irish. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. Thanks again for making this your first watch or listen of the day. And thanks to viewers and listeners like yourself, Locked On is now the #1 sports podcast network in America. We really appreciate your support. All right, now let's get back to the questions here. At Johnny Mack has a two-parter. The first question, which player has impressed you the most during the second half of the season? Josh Burnham, Sullivan Absher, Tay Johnson, or Elijah Hughes? The second question, do you have more faith in Eric Schmidt kicking a 40-plus yard field goal or Eli Raridan scoring a touchdown? All right, let's get to the first part of the question first. Tay Johnson is the easy answer, right? He's been incredible, but he started to come on during like the early portion of the season. He's not a second half blossomer type of player, but the defense has improved so much as he has developed, and he is a big-time playmaker that they really needed. Like, you could really feel the loss of Xavier Watts at the beginning of the season, and you still feel it to some extent, right? Because Xavier Watts is a two-time All-American. He's already one of the best safeties in the NFL. But what made Watts so special was his playmaking ability and his football IQ and the way that he was a coach on the field. Tay Johnson is not a coach on the field yet. He's getting better, but man, he is a playmaker, and he has been so good for this defense. And the fact that Notre Dame's defense has gotten so much better as the season has progressed is directly related to how Tay Johnson has progressed as a player in this Notre Dame secondary. But Josh Burnham certainly makes a great case too, because he has been terrific as of late. During the first 7 games of the season, Josh Burnham was averaging about 12 snaps a game because he has been dealing with an injury, which unfortunately for him has kind of been like the story of his career. He's always had some nagging injury that he's been dealing with, but credit to him because that dude is extremely tough and he'll play through anything, no matter how bad it's hurting him. And Marcus Freeman even admitted, like, Josh Burnham is totally fine going out there at like 60% because he just wants to give it all for this team, but sometimes they have to protect him from himself. But since the bye week, after that game against USC, Josh Burnham has gotten healthy, and in 3 games, he has racked up 10 quarterback hurries, 3 sacks, and 5 run stops. He has elevated the entire defensive line with his play, and I think he's only going to get better. So he has been a huge boost to the defensive line, but so has Elijah Hughes. So you could really go with any one of these guys. Sullivan Absher looked a little bit better against Pitt, but I think it's got to be Josh Burnham and Tay Johnson if we're going back all the way to the beginning of the season. Now, as for the second question, am I more confident in Eric Schmidt kicking a field goal or Eli Raridan scoring a touchdown? It's tough, man. It's tough because anyone who's been watching or listening to this show knows I have been banging the drum for Eli Raridan anytime touchdown, and it has just not happened. But this week, I have sworn it off. I have bailed on this bet, which probably means he's going to score 3 touchdowns, but it won't be because of me. I am not going to bet it this week. However, in this question, I got to go with Eli Raridan because I actually have seen Eli Raridan score a touchdown before. It's been a while. As a matter of fact, I think his last touchdown was basically a year ago to this day because he scored a touchdown against USC on the road. I was at that game. I saw it happen, so I know he's capable of scoring a touchdown. But I've never seen Eric Schmidt make a field goal. He's 0 for 3 on the year. They haven't really been anything close. So I don't know I don't know which one I can say I'm really confident in, but I can just tell you I actually have seen Eli Raridan score a touchdown. So for the sake of this question, I've got to pick that. But man, it's just been frustrating, especially last week. Like, that was such a joke that Eli Raridan did not score. And I love that this has become like a great bit on the show and how many people have texted me or DM me about the Eli Raridan situation. So hopefully for his sake in his last game in Notre Dame Stadium, he gets in the end zone. But again, if he does, I certainly won't be able to profit off of any of that. I'm just in debt at this point. Okay, Connor Cross, 17. Notre Dame has not had a quarterback throw for 30 or more passing touchdowns in a season since Ian Book. Do you think Carr, who has 21 touchdowns, will get there this season? Well, I don't think he's going to have 9 in the next 2 games, so this question is really dependent on whether or not this team makes a run in the college football playoff. Hopefully, CJ Carr is out of the game in the third quarter of each of these next 2 games. Now, he could still put up plenty of stats against Syracuse and then against Stanford. I think he should, and he ultimately will. But then it's about the playoff. And as I've said before, the playoff is not guaranteed. There are still things that could happen that could keep Notre Dame out. I went through all of those in the show that came out on Wednesday, I believe it was. Yes, because the rankings came out on Tuesday. So on the Wednesday show, I reacted to Notre Dame's playoff ranking, went through a bunch of different scenarios. Ones where Notre Dame could end up hosting a playoff game, ones where they would make the playoff, but they would just have to go on the road in the first round, and the doomsday scenarios in which they don't make it at all. So the odds have kind of been all over the place about Notre Dame's path to the playoff, depending on what book you're looking at. But this show is sponsored by FanDuel. If you go on FanDuel right now, they are minus 4,000. I've seen them as low as minus 2,500. So it's not a low number. Every book says that Notre Dame is basically going to be in the playoffs so long as they win out, which everyone expects that they will. And I'll admit that seems pretty high, considering the amount of scenarios that could play out where Notre Dame might not get in, like if Michigan ends up going undefeated, if they beat Ohio State, or not undefeated, if they close out the regular season undefeated, they beat Ohio State, that could knock Notre Dame out. If Alabama wins the SEC championship, if BYU beats Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship, and then the Big 12 gets 2 bids, who knows what's going to happen with this Miami situation. But I wish the committee chair had just said what they truly believe in that room. Like, when they watch the tape, they see a top 5 team in Notre Dame, but they have 2 losses, so they're 9th. Like, if Hunter Yurachek just said that and said, we see an elite team in the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, they can win the national championship, but they've lost 2 games, so they can't be ahead of the undefeateds or the 1-loss teams. I think people would actually be a lot more receptive to that than talking about quality losses, because it just makes the committee look bad. And Notre Dame is in the top 10 in every statistical metric that they use. They're ahead of Alabama. They're certainly ahead of Miami. But when they talk about the quality losses, they just kind of put their foot in their mouth sometimes. So just say it. Notre Dame could win a national championship. There's only a few other teams who can say that, and we believe that they should be in the college football playoff. I'm sorry to Counter Cross 17 because I've now gone on a playoff tangent, which is not what I expected to do in this question. But look, if Notre Dame gets to the college football playoff, Carr is going to be a big reason why they advance, so he's going to eclipse 30 passing touchdowns. But because of this question, I actually went back and looked. Ian Book had 34 passing touchdowns in 2019 and only 6 interceptions, which is kind of weird because you don't remember that as like one of the great quarterback seasons in Notre Dame history, but he was really, really good that year. Almost carried them to a win over Georgia when they just couldn't run the ball at all. So Ian Book, friend of the program, very underrated as a quarterback at Notre Dame. Okay, next up here, we got a question from Ryan Fritz. Who do you think will have a more successful Notre Dame career, Cam Williams or Elijah Burris? This one's easy. I think it's going to be Elijah Burris. I heard more good things about Elijah Burris in one offseason alone than 2.5 full years of Cam Williams. Elijah Burris enrolled early, so he was around the team back in January of 2025, and he became like the go-to guy during spring practice because Malachi Fields wasn't part of the team yet. Will Pauling was on the team, but he was still dealing with an injury, so he was not a full participant. Jane Greathouse was basically sitting out because he had played so much in the season prior. So as CJ Carr and Kenny Minchie were battling it out for that starting quarterback job, and Steve Angeli was there too, Elijah Burris was getting a lot of those reps, and we saw that in the spring game. He got a touchdown there. He was making some plays in fall camp too. So I think the future is extremely bright for Elijah Burris, and I still think Cam Williams could be a nice player. The fact that we saw him out there against Navy with CJ Carr still out in the field was a cool moment. Unfortunately for him, that ball was a little bit underthrown, but he still drew the defensive pass interference penalty. So I think Cam Williams could be a nice player, a productive player at Notre Dame. I don't expect him to live up to the 5-star hype that he had as a recruit, but I think Elijah Burris is going to be a really, really good player for Notre Dame. He's still got to learn the playbook. If you remember, Mike Denbrock was pretty critical of Elijah Burris and his inability to know where he needs to be on a given play. And it's rare that you see a coach call out a player like that, but I think he did it from a place of love and sort of a kick in the butt. Like, hey, man, you're an elite player. Mike Denbrock even said it. He is going to be elite. He just needs to know where to be as a true freshman. Sometimes that happens, but I think the future for Elijah Burris is really awesome, and he could end up being a big-time wide receiver for this Irish offense in the years to come. All right, now let's close it out with some fun. Next up, we're going to talk about Senior Day traditions, honoring 3-and-out stars, and a Notre Dame time machine trip to finish out the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth-quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. So, a couple weeks ago on the show, I gave out Victor Wembanyama to win the MVP, and now he's got a calf strain. He's going to be out for the next few weeks, which is extremely disappointing because he had been on an absolute tear to start the season. But I don't want to give out any more picks right now about the NBA. I don't want to steer you guys in the wrong direction, but you don't need my help. FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, our next question here on the Friday Mailbag comes from @IrishFryers Yabos 26.2. Would it really be a Friday Mailbag without Yabos chiming in here? Yabo's asked, what are your thoughts on Notre Dame honoring legendary juniors like Jeremiah Love on senior day? Since he's obviously not coming back, should they make exceptions for 3-and-out guys to give fans one last chance to show some love? Similarly, do you have any idea if they will give Steve Angeli a moment, even though he's no longer with us? He does have his degree and should be treated with the respect of any Notre Dame alum when they come home. Well, first off, let me just say, the phrasing of even though he's no longer with us pertaining to Steve Angeli makes it sound like he's dead. He's not dead. He's just injured. I expect him to be on the sideline this Saturday, but no, I don't expect Notre Dame to give Steve Angeli any sort of like moment of recognition during the game. But I'll get back to Steve in a second. Let's talk about Jeremiah Love first, because I don't think that Love should do the walkout on the field because that's reserved for seniors. It's senior day and he's not a senior, and I think that part is sacred. With that being said, they should definitely honor Jeremiah Love on the Jumbotron and give the fans an opportunity to sort of send him off one last time, give him a round of applause, and I'm sure they're going to do that. Notre Dame has been really aggressive in their campaigning for Jeremiah Love. Now, there are some of you out there, maybe one Luke Smith, who does not approve of the campaign that's been going on social media, maybe specifically the Nicholas Sparks video. But either way, Notre Dame is supporting their guy, and they're absolutely going to support him on Saturday in what we all know is going to be his last home regular season game. So they're going to give him a proper send-off. If I had to guess, they're probably going to be up a ton in the second half. And I could see a scenario where the offense goes out on the field, and then Jeremiah Love goes out there with the rest of the offense, and then they decide, hey, Jeremiah, actually come out of the game. And in that moment, the PA announcer could come on and say, coming off the field, Jeremiah Love, and they'll put something up on the Jumbotron, and everyone will get on their feet and just cheer him on. I've actually seen them do that before. I think it was back in 2012. Notre Dame was playing Wake Forest. It was actually Manti Te'o's last home game at Notre Dame, and that's when all the students had the lays and everything like that. Notre Dame was just hammering Wake Forest, and they were undefeated at that point, knocking on the door of a national championship appearance, and that was just a really, really cool game. It was freezing cold. I remember going to that game with my family, but the senior day stuff around that game was just really special because Notre Dame had just not been good in so long, so there was just such a great relationship between the fan base and that team. So when Notre Dame was winning big, they were like basically having guys one by one come off the field for their own little send-off. And I think you could absolutely do that with Jeremiah Love. As a matter of fact, I think it will happen. Going back to Angeli, look, I love Steve Angeli. I love what he did for the program. He sacrificed a ton, and he definitely deserves recognition. But he transferred from this team to a team that's on the schedule. So, like, I can be grateful for everything that Steve Angeli did, but if he did not get hurt, he would be on the other side. He would be out there on the field trying to prevent Notre Dame from making it back to the college football playoff because of a decision he made. And while I understand why he made that decision, he got plenty of money to go to Syracuse. He had a great opportunity, and he was doing really well before he got hurt. They should never recognize someone when they're wearing the opposing uniform. Now, if he comes back years from now, he's on the sideline for a Notre Dame game, sure, he can get recognized. But you can't do it when he's in the opposing team's uniform. To me, that makes no sense. I actually got a mailbag question that I didn't expect to even talk about on the show because I thought it was a ridiculous question. No offense. Thanks for watching and listening. Should Steve Angeli get a ring if Notre Dame won a national championship? Like, what are we doing, guys? He transferred out. He went to a different team. Like, no, he does not deserve a national championship ring if Notre Dame gets one. Like that just doesn't make any sense to me, right? He made his decision. I get it, but he still went to the opposition. And to me, you should not be rewarded by Notre Dame for making that decision. Okay, next up. Got a little intense there. That was not my intention. Katie ND1. Tommy Carr, CJ Carr's younger brother, flipped his commitment from Miami, Ohio to Michigan recently. I'm curious if Notre Dame ever recruited him or what the story is with him in general. There were conversations, there are plenty of conversations between Notre Dame and the Carr family about Tommy, but never really materialized into anything significant, and I think both parties are responsible for that. For one, I think Tommy always wanted to do his own thing and not follow CJ, so he decided to be the son who fulfilled the family prophecy. He's going to Michigan like so many others in his family, his dad, his grandpa who won the national championship, all that. So I think it's pretty cool that he is going to be the Carr son that ends up going to Michigan. And then I also understand why you don't want to just go to the same place where your brother currently goes to and is going to be a star, because then while you're at that program, you're always trying to live up to CJ. And considering what CJ has already done, that's going to be tough, right? Those are difficult shoes to fill. He's also like a low 3-star recruit. He's a number 44 quarterback in the country on the 24/7 Sports Composite. So, Notre Dame wasn't desperate to have him. I think it would have been cool to have both CJ and Tommy on the same team at the same time. But it's not like losing out on him is going to be a big blow to Notre Dame's quarterback room. It would have been a cool story, but I think Notre Dame, they had interest elsewhere, and I think Tommy recognized that it'd be tough for him to get playing time on Notre Dame. Maybe he has a better opportunity at Michigan, but this is not a situation where Notre Dame just avoided Tommy and then now the family is going to be pissed off at Notre Dame. No, this was a mutual decision. All parties were in agreement that this was the best for Tommy, and I think everyone's cool with that going forward. All right, last question here. I love this one. Bob Heeland, 447. My dad used to teach at Notre Dame back in the 1960s, and I went to most of the home games. Bob says, if I had a Notre Dame football time machine, I would go back to those games and see my childhood heroes, Terry Hanratty and Jim Seymour. Tyler, if you had a Notre Dame football time machine, what game would you go back to? I would go to the Catholics-Convicts game. I'd go to 1988, Notre Dame, Miami. I have heard so much about the Lou Holtz era of Notre Dame football from my dad and my uncle and my grandpa when he was still with us. And I'd love to go see a Lou Holtz team play. And it was the best Lou Holtz team that he had. They went on to win the national championship. So it would be awesome to be able to see that, experience one of the greatest college football games ever, live and in person. And I'd also love to see what Notre Dame Stadium looked like before all the renovations, because when I started to go to games, they already had the main renovation that they built in, was it 1995, before the Campus Crossroads project, obviously. So I have no grasp of what the stadium looked like before that. And when I was watching Rudy the last time I saw it, I think it was back in the summer, I was just in awe of how small the stadium is. When Rudy walks out there on the field, you kind of forget. You're like, oh my God, that's right. Notre Dame was such a small stadium, and then they've just continued to build on top of it. But I think it would be really cool to be there. I've heard it was super, super loud that day. And plus, you think about all the talent that was on the field in that game. You'll remember that game forever. I went to the LSU-Alabama game back in 2019 at Alabama, Joe Burrow versus Tua Tagovailoa, NFL players all over the field. And I still remember that aspect of the game. And I found out recently that 60 players who participated in that game between LSU and Alabama back in 2019, 60 made it to the NFL. That's insane. And that's how the 1988 Notre Dame-Miami game was too. So that would be really fun to see. I actually thought about doing the 1993 Notre Dame-Florida State game, but I'm going to be honest, I couldn't go to that game knowing what I know, knowing what happened next. I couldn't help but think about how sad everyone in the crowd would be, or would end up being a week later after the loss to Boston College. I think that would take away from my experience. But if I were at the Catholics-Convicts game, I wouldn't have to deal with that, because I would get to enjoy an awesome game, an unbelievable win for Notre Dame, and I would know that it only got better from there. So I think I'd appreciate it a lot more. But that is a great question. I love wrapping up the mailbag with fun questions like that. And that was one of the best I've gotten in recent weeks. But that's going to do it for this mailbag. Thanks again for making this your first watch or listen of the day, and for tuning in all week long. I really appreciate your support. If you have not already, please subscribe on YouTube, like the video below, and rate and review the podcast on your preferred platform. And if you're heading to the Syracuse game this weekend, don't forget, send in your boots on the ground report. Me and Luke are going to read the best one on Tuesday's show. Really looking forward to that. Really looking forward to seeing and hearing all the different experiences that you guys had over the weekend. Enjoy senior day, enjoy the game, and I'm going to see you next time right here on Locked On Irish. We will be back here Sunday night live. Unfortunately, no instant reaction episode on Saturday. We'll be here Sunday night live, 8 p.m. Eastern on the Locked On Irish YouTube channel, and the podcast will go up immediately after. I'll see you then.